There are two very fundamental rules when it comes to electrical safety. Rule number one is that electricity is always seeking a path between different potentials. Rule number two is don't be that path. What it comes down to is that you can survive a single point of electrical contact. It's the second one that's going to get you. This type of electrical hazard manifests itself into two major types of exposures for workers on the job site: touch potential and step potential. It must be understood that if any portion of an uninsulated object, such as this truck, makes unprotected contact with an energized electrical source, then that entire object must be considered as energized to the full source voltage. So right now we've energized this truck to 10,000 volts. And this energized truck is now channeling that 10,000 volts right to the ground, which is where our voltage gradient distribution curve begins. And it just so happens we have a worker in the vicinity. This worker is standing on an area of the ground that is energized to, say, somewhere around 1800 volts. As long as he keeps his feet together, he is making a single point of electrical contact, because his right foot is at 1800 volts and his left foot is at 1800 volts. The difference between 1800 and 1800 is 0. Therefore, this worker has, for all practical purposes, 0 volts difference flowing across his body. He is safe. However, when the worker reaches out and touches the energized truck, he is now making 2 points of electrical contact. The first point of electrical contact is the 1800 volts at his feet. The second point of contact is the 10,000 volts at the worker's right hand. The difference between 10,000 volts and 1800 volts is 8200 volts. It is this 8200 volt difference that is now flowing across the worker. This is touch potential. Yeah, I know. It's the current that kills the worker, not the voltage. This is true, but don't forget Ohm's law, where current equals voltage divided by resistance. But we're going to have to shelve that discussion for a later module. So before we get too far beyond the booty, let's refocus and move on. Let's rewind a bit and put our worker back to where he's making a single point of electrical contact because both of his feet are at the same electrical potential, which in this case is 2500 volts. So now, instead of the worker reaching out to touch the energized vehicle, he begins to walk away from the energized vehicle. And as he does so, both feet are no longer at the same voltage potential. One foot remains at 2500 volts while the other lands at 1250 volts. The worker is now making 2 points of different electrical contact. The difference between 2500 volts and 1250 volts is 1250 volts. This is the amount of voltage the worker will now have passing across his body. This is step potential. Now let's look at what's referred to as equipotential. First, realize that it's called equipotential, not equal potential. This is because even in the best of circumstances, a worker in an equipotential zone of protection will still have some degree of voltage difference across his or her body. The objective is to maintain that drop so low that the worker will not be susceptible to its hazardous effects, much less even be able to feel its presence. But again, we're going to have to shelve that for a later discussion and refocus. What we need to know at this time is that, as is the case here, our worker is keeping all of his body contacts at the same voltage level. Both of his feet are at 2500 volts. This equates to 0 volts or near 0 volts across the worker's body. Therefore, the worker is not being exposed to any hazardous voltage differences, which means the worker is safe. This is equipotential. Equipotential is why vehicle drivers and operators are the most protected workers on any site where that vehicle has come into contact with an energized electrical source. That vehicle or piece of equipment is constructed of steel. This makes that vehicle or piece of equipment, in essence, nothing more than an electrical conductor, and any worker who is on that vehicle or piece of equipment will be the proverbial bird on a wire. This is because no matter how you slice it, all of the contact points that the worker is making, the hands, the feet, the butt, the back, are all at the same electrical potential. So if the vehicle becomes energized to our 10,000 volts, then all vehicle components must also be considered to be energized to 10,000 volts. This means that the operator's hands, which are in contact with the machine's controls, which are now at 10,000 volts, are also at 10,000 volts. The operator's feet, in contact with the machine's 10,000 volt pedals, or floorboard, are also at 10,000 volts. The same goes for the operator's butt and back in the 10,000 volt operator's chair. However you want to crunch the numbers, you'll find that the difference between any two of these 10,000 volt points is 0. Therefore, there's a 0 volt difference across the worker's body. He is safe. Another example of equipotential includes remaining on a backhoe that has just dug into an underground electrical line. Remaining on a vehicle whose boom has contacted an overhead energized electrical line. and another is being in a vehicle that has just been struck by lightning. And no, it was never the rubber tires that protected you.